Let's continue here. Oh, is this a battle? No. Okay, export of tungsten will last for a year to Bolivia. Yeah, I could use the money because they're draining us of money, and I don't like that. I don't like the way they use money. This is just the occasion here that these guys are blocking the retreat. Okay, well, we took out, here we took out a heavy cruiser. We lost none. Past pilot training has advanced. Let's see here on the, yeah, 42, we're continuing that. We're trying to get our air cooling systems. Right. Is air cooling systems. I think it's either grayed out or, okay, yeah, it's one and done. Okay. But that allows us to research climb rate focus and single engine maneuverability focus. Avionics, maybe? No. Here, okay. So both of these look like pure good stuff. So let's start with that one. Okay, so they've lost the DD there, and we've taken a little bit of damage. And what's our fleet like here, condition-wise? Okay, that's looking good. The carriers, and yeah, nope. Another sort of thing. Okay, so we're here, and I do think if we can, we will try to withdraw while we're in good shape to this other island here. Okay, Super 6, just a, well, hopefully this end until U.S. gets recruitment. Okay, so we could use some these guys out here. Rebase. We have these guys for air intercept. Now we just got 6 armor division. Yeah, cool, but I need divisions, not just HQs. Yes, the fighters and naval units will rebase if they're lost, if their base is lost. No, it may be a little better to us rebasing them. These guys here are pretty well shot up, and they are overstacking, so we're going to send them back up to Clark up there. These guys can come over to here. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them on naval striking here. Okay, now this is fairly deep inside Japanese territory, because here's Wake up here. I do not really want to use surface ships to protect our transports. Okay, light anti-aircraft. Yeah. Stop that. We're going to go back to here and do single engine maneuverability focus. British moving a battleship around here. Battleship, destroyer, and 2 light cruisers. Where are they going? God, I don't know. Maybe they're shadowing some. Sometimes the AI will shadow some fleet for a long, long time. Okay. Well, and this is happening because of our losing transports. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to declare war against Germany. Okay. We can declare war. I was waiting to see if there was an event that Germany was going to declare war on the United States. Now, it made it super simple for America that Germany declares war right after Pearl Harbor. Because there were a lot of Americans that just sort of looked at Europe and said, they're always just going to war with each other. Yeah, okay, the Great War, World War One, but you have the Franco-Prussian War before that, and you have all these other wars going on. The war, the 19th century wars of the Italian unification, and you got all this stuff going on. And why do we need to go fight in their wars? And of course, you have much, much, much larger European descendant population in America than you do Asian, still to this day, obviously. So, yeah, there are, and especially in World War II, as time goes on, with okay, Poland, yeah, there's Polish Americans, but they're actually a fairly small minority. And a few Czechoslovak Americans, yeah, they're really small. You have a lot more Russian Americans of various types, or people inside of Russia or the Soviet Union, whether they consider themselves Russians. Various Eastern peoples. And you have a lot of other, but you also have huge numbers of Italians and German Americans, and both as in immigrants as well as born here. The Italian American community, even to this day, and elements of it, have sort of this love-hate relationship with Mussolini, and especially back then, a lot of Italian Americans sort of looked upon Mussolini as someone trying to get Italy organized right, correct, or whatever you want to say. And then other ones were, shall we say, Sicilian. Mr. Duck's back. Very good. Sicilians, and some of them were, in gangsters or had families or associates of gangsters in Italy. Mussolini goes after them hard. So once the war really breaks out, America does a deal with its gangster community, which has been negatively impacting America ever since. We'll just close this down. One, they work with some of the gangster communities to make sure that the dock workers, shall we say, work well during the war. There are. Some of you may have caught some of the stream, and I will probably put up a version eventually of Starship Troopers Terran Command, which is a great game, I would say, if you like Starship Troopers lore. And they talk about in there, and it's sort of in a sarcastic way of, that union organizing is helping, is like a criminal offense because it strikes because it's helping, the aliens win. Well, yeah, it really sort of kind of is, because, and they make it out as in a way, a lot of people now, I think, would go, oh, look at, the outlawed unions, these people are fascists. Well, because I recently read the book, and actually a couple days ago now, 3 days ago, I read the book finally, but I'd seen the movies and the TV series and others before it, but they were losing the war both in the book and the TV series. They were losing the war to the bugs. And the bugs were exterminating humanity, not just, different people in charge, and is it worth dying for? No, it was, you could die fighting, or if you give up, you're going to die anyways. And so union organizing of any sort of opposition union, as opposed to like you see communist unions in a communist country, or Nazi unions in Nazi Germany, those are functions of the state. So they are just making sure everything works smoothly, kind of thing, is all that they're doing. But yeah, if you're facing a war of extermination, maybe you shouldn't do strikes and organized worker protests, because maybe things are fucked up, but things are all going to hell anyways, and you got to get it done. Because to get to a real world human period, maybe mid-late 42, while Guadalcanal is going on as, and again, this should be a single province island. I don't like what Black Ice has done. Comes at one Liberty ship a day comes at a cost, absolutely. But while Guadalcanal was going on, while the U.S. needed to get supplies that they were, I forget, the guy came and asked my opinion on, did I like what he was responsible for adding these sort of turning these islands into two province islands. And I told him I didn't like it. I don't like it. But in a way, if we were talking about a game that was about this here, yeah, this, playing the Solomon Islands campaign or whatever, or even this sort of campaign, yeah, what he was doing was good, but for this grand strategy and the size of this thing. But when the Americans, for whatever little port there was, Japan sort of had it, but the Americans are landing stuff on the beach, and there are serious dock worker strikes going on while that is happening in Australia, at the very docks that the Americans are trying to unload supplies from ships that are coming from America, to load them on ships and load them on in a way in which they can take them off the ship. Because, the way you're putting on supplies in San Francisco or Los Angeles or wherever and sending them to Australia, okay, that's one thing. But when you want to offload them onto a beach, you want to get them, ready to sort of, get off the ship and put them on landing ships and ships capable of doing it. So you have to reorganize the cargo. So the very people that they're requiring and needing to offload these supplies and reload them onto other ships, while guys are dying, Australian dock workers are striking over things. And you know what? Yes, I would say it would have been perfectly fine to get out there and hang 20 or 30 of them, because guys are dying while you guys are striking. And I think it was incredibly because they weren't already in the practice was, well, hey, the guy who has the worst work performance today, we're hanging them, or something. They weren't doing, cruel and unusual punishments to these dock workers in Australia. And look at what cruel and unusual might be going on in other parts of the world, in the Soviet Union, in China, in Japan, to workers, in Manchukuo, who weren't, to slave workers around the world, literally slave workers that we can talk about in Nazi Germany, not just whatever. These guys were fucking striking for, I don't know, better pay, better whatever, better working conditions, better hours, or whatever, while guys are dying up here. And it's not just like other things. It was striking over getting these guys their supplies. And so that to me is criminal, and that to me is just like, okay, let's just line all you dock workers up, and we're just randomly lining you up, and then count decimation. Every 10th person, we just shoot right there in line. Just shoot right there in line, and go, tomorrow, are you going to be working hard, or we're going to decimate you again? And I'm mad at this, and yes, this happened a long time ago. But this is because guys are dying here, and they're not getting the bullets and the fuel and whatever they need. And if you're that fucking selfish, that's criminal. And it's criminal to the extent that, yes, I do think death penalty, because it's combat and it's helping the enemy. So Australian dock workers were doing that during the war. Okay, well, the mafia is used. There were strikes in America during the war, and the ones that I know about, and I don't know everything. Trust me, I've not delved deep into the American home front, but I think one of them this is Chicago over here. I think one of them was in Chicago, or maybe it was in Detroit, but one of these industrial cities in the north. City transportation workers, whether they were trolleys or buses or whatever, I forget the detail, go on strike at some point because they start hiring black workers to work on those things, on the city transportation. And these people are looking out for their group's job, whether it's Polish Americans or just white Americans or whatever else. This is in the North. This is not in the South. This is not the segregated South, which very much was segregated during this time period. This was bringing in blacks that had moved up to here, bringing them in to work on these, in some of these plants here. But the transportation worker stopped. Well, now the worker can't get to his work because these cities are dense and they're not like California, and they've already shut down a lot of because again of rubber, not because so much for the fuel. Because America has a fuel problem on the Burma front. America has a fuel problem out in the desert, because it's getting the fuel. America definitely, as you well know, the Patton and whatever running out of fuel. Yeah, America has a fuel problem here. America don't have a fuel problem in Britain. America certainly doesn't have a fuel problem in America. It has a fuel problem out on the the edges of its military action, but it doesn't have a fuel problem of enough refineries or getting the fuel around here. It's enough tankers and because you can put 50-gallon oil drums, we call them, but drums filled with gasoline in it, but that's more unstable. It could blow the ship up. It's better to do it as tankers, and America is severely limited on tankers, so it does have tanker problems. It really does, but that's outside of America. And it might be some region somewhere is relying upon tankers as opposed to train cars, but probably they can move the fuel and train cars just fine around America. So they really don't have a gas problem in America, gasoline problem, I should say, in America during the war. So keeping workers from getting to work because the trams, the trolleys, the buses, so I don't know that Chicago, if they had an underground or if it was above ground train system, I don't know. But it wasn't running because they were hiring black workers. They wanted to keep it up. So they move in the Army because trust me, there's lots of Army. Some of it's training, some of it's National Guard. There's lots of soldiers all over America. America limits its deployment. It determines at some point to have only 100 divisions deployed overseas. No more, no less. Well, eventually they get up to 100 divisions or something, but no more than 100 divisions. And that isn't because of manpower or production. It's because of shipping. They don't have enough shipping to supply. They determine more than 100 divisions and supply, the 8th Air Force and whatever the Air Force number that was operating here that was bombing Ploetzi and fighting in North Africa and fighting the Air Force that's fighting in China, Chennault's Air Force, and the Air Force that's bombing Japan, and as well as supplying all of the supplies to British and Commonwealth and other places, all of the shipping that it needed. It determined 100 divisions, and I think it was partially just a round number, not that they scientifically worked out that they couldn't do 102 or 98, but they figured 100 divisions. And of course, there's a lot of core assets and a lot of other auxiliary American ground and rear area units that are fighting. But 100 divisions was designed to be the maximum. They almost had a revolt when some of the really good divisions that had defeated Germany were going to be shipped over and now fight to Japan. It was going to be close to. I don't know if they would have actually gone into a, sort of revolt type situation, but there was certainly considering, true thinking about that. It's go our war, and they were just our war was with Germany. We're done. You've got more divisions. Send those to fight Japan. We've done our war now. We've defeated Nazis. And I think they have a very good point there. Now, of course, because they were thinking they were going to need a lot more divisions, because the guys planning for the war didn't know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the nuclear bombs. That was such a secret. They didn't quite know, so they thought they were going to have to invade and use a lot more divisions. And there were a bunch more than 100 divisions. Bunch in the U.S. I don't know how many more than 100, than the 100 that are deployed overseas, but they were like, hey, draft new people, recruit new people, do something. We've done our war, and we're fine for, and some of the units were there for a few years, occupying, the same soldiers occupying Germany as opposed to fresh soldiers coming over after the war. They were fine at still serving America. It was, hey, we've done our war. We fought our war in Europe. Let the guys in the Pacific handle it. If you need people to guard America, sure, send us home and we'll guard America. Send the guys guarding America to go fight Japan. So there was there was some sort of idea of a revolt there. But shipping is the real problem. But so they were, so there's lots of soldiers around. So they put the army in charge for a short while, running the transportation to keep the war effort going. But even with all of that, they're really looking at that sort of strike. It's bad because it's over racist ideas, but it's as much, I will say this, racism, yes, but a lot of it, I would say, is our group versus that group. The group, because there already had been considerable numbers of Black Americans in places like Chicago and Detroit, but the war really brings up a lot more Black workers out of the South, because you got to remember, we've been in the Great Depression for 10 years, that a lot of these factories are just literally shut down. They're still there. They're still just fine, maybe. They're just sitting there. They've just gone out of business because no one was buying their widgets or their gadgets. And so they just get shut down. So there's not a lot of, migration out of the South. The South is, poor anyways. But once the war, armaments industry is gearing up with the war in Europe, that we're selling off stuff, and then once America's in it, there's jobs. Just about anybody who wants a job can have a job in America. You don't have to be literate, because you can work on a farm, and they want people to work, and they're going to pay people to work. And it's not just subsistence farming, it's, grow cotton, and for cotton uniforms. It's, ranch, get all that, have beef in America, and send beef overseas, but it's all that leather that you need for the boots and the belts and all that kind of stuff. So, there was, so poor, uneducated people in America, not always Black, but because, trust me, there's a lot of, in these hills, there's a lot of poor, uneducated white people, and a lot of these areas it's actually very white. The mountainous area, my understanding, is very white, or at least traditionally was. It wasn't like the coastal plain here, which was where the Blacks were, because of the sort of slave plantation versus the hillbillies, whether they're Southern or whatever you want to call hillbillies up here, but the Appalachian types. It really wasn't too much of a mixed community, as far as I know, at least at the time. I'm not talking about modern demographics, but there. So you have all these jobs that are needed, and so there's a lot of black people moving in, and so it's people moving in that were obviously not the locals. And I'm a Westerner. I've grown up in California. My parents were born and raised in California. At least one of my grandparents was born in California, though several of the other ones, of my understanding, would generally say being raised as like immigrating here at like 5 or 10 years old. So, and all of my grandparents were in California prior to the start of World War II. So I'm a Westerner, but I talked to and known, and of course it got media, that a lot of this up here is segregated, but not necessarily like you would think like segregation in the South. It's segregation by neighborhood, but also by certain professions and or certain factories where like predominantly one or two ethnic groups, like Polish Americans and Italian Americans in a factory, but keep out the Irish or whatever. And it's sort of neighborhoods like that, more so than, and it's very urban in this kind of stuff, because rurally, it's a lot of, again, my understanding, and hopefully this is of interest. Hey, I live around those hills. Oh, so you live sort of, ZZ lives sort of in Aries area. Aries lives in, Kentucky. But yeah, ZZ is a Appalachian type guy. Tell me if you think I'm getting anything wrong. You might not like my characterization, but tell me if you think I'm getting anything wrong, particularly talking about how it was back then. And so I'm talking, but so the Southwest Virginia. Okay, cool. That's he's down in this area. So yeah, you're just sort of over the border from Airy, who's a periodic showing up on the channel, playing War Thunder, playing some of our multiplayer Boy 4 games. But here is mostly Protestant groups. A lot of like Pennsylvania Dutch are really America's misunderstanding of Pennsylvania Deutsch or Germans. So there's Protestant Germans, there's Protestant actual Dutch. There's a lot of Anglo types. Irish, some Irish, yes, farmers for sure, but a lot of Scots and English that are rurally. A lot of the rural people are the Anglos, where you get the urban city areas that have been populated in the 19th century, and a lot of them are coming, Eastern and other Europeans. Now, getting more out into the West, because that's when the land is available in the 19th century, you have a lot more of like your Norwegians, other Scandinavians and other Eastern European farmers migrating and coming in here. But a lot of this was already settled, and there wasn't, either free land or cheap land or whatever. I grew up in a bubble university town, so I was shielded from the poverty. But when I see where some of my family grew up, it's just destitute poverty. Absolutely, ZZ. What do you do for a living? Basically YouTube. Like I sort of describe myself as independently poor at the moment. So yeah, no, basically it's sort of YouTube and streaming and whatnot and things. So not a whole lot beyond that. I do have a bit of family, and trust me, it's not a lot, but some family support money, but it's, yeah. So if any of you guys want to donate to my Patreon, or, nobody's super chatted me on YouTube yet. Not that you guys need to or feel guilted into it. What I want to guilt you into is giving me a thumbs up and subscribing and posting comments. That's what I try to guilt you into. But if anybody wants to support here more, that'd be lovely. You only need a PC, internet, and bread and water. Yeah, hello, Don. I'd like a little bit more than that, but yeah, I mean... So, a lot of the urban places, and a lot of them, and I've talked to some of these guys that have grown up, back in the 70s and whatnot. I've talked to them over the years in these eastern areas, and these urban centers, within the urban centers, are highly segregated, at least for me as a Westerner. We do have certain areas out here that are certain ethnic groups, but it's much more so, and much more so in the, we'll call it white. I don't like to use the term white because it various connotations, and I'm trying to get away from those. But with various ethnic groups, but that are generally European in descent, it's highly segregated, and it's highly, they're in the 19th century and into the early 20th century, there's a lot of resistance to, a company hiring outside of certain communities within it, and that could cause strikes and whatnot. And I'm just trying to put this out here because it's often in, modern day, current day, whatever you want to call it, put out to be purely along what they want to call racial lines and talking about darker skin colored people. Hell, there's as much, different times anti-Catholic or anti-Italian or anti-whatever, anti-Polish because, it's, Catholic Italians are anti-Catholic Polish or something. And it's just more this community versus that community that is, sort of segregated out. And so that's some of what the Chicago strikes is, but it's also looking at, hey, well, when my brother who's off at the war, whether he's a guy carrying a gun or he's a guy working on an airplane mechanic or a guy in the Navy, when he comes home, I wanted him to get the job at the trolley company, the whatever company. I didn't want some foreigner. They'd probably put some other pejoratives on some of these people, but some of these other people taking this job away. Well, hey, I wasn't even complaining. I gotta try to pronounce this. J. Vondras Folk. Thank you so much, sir. You are the first ever contributor of a super chat. Yay! And that's not a complaint. Wow. Thank you so much. You don't know how much I appreciate that. That is so much. And that's all you ever need to do. That is so nice. I really do appreciate it. You don't know, man, that's great. That somebody cares enough. Great, thank you. It's more like Z voudrais Fuki? Okay. Z voudrais Vuki? My Anglo tongue is not good at this. So yeah, and poverty in America, like Azizi's talking about in these hills, is still to this day grinding poverty, and it's mostly white people. So yes, race does play into it, but ethnic groups, social status, all of that plays into it. But this, and this strike is, that happens up in Chicago. I think it's Chicago or Detroit. It doesn't really matter where. That it's a transportation strike. It does affect the war in a super minor way. And it's to the point that, yes, you need to bring in the army to run the situation. But I don't look at it as nearly, and for its reasons are probably, to us looking back, because they are sort of racial reasons, not good reasons to strike. I'm not talking about the reasons to strike versus the Australian reasons to strike. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about its immediate effect on lives and people in combat, in that the Australian strike happens while they're trying to load and unload ships to get up to an active combat zone. And that, to me, makes a big difference here. So free press is hurting this. You mean if I were to, what would it be? Civil law, free press. Okay. National unity. Okay, so if I go to a censored press, it will help national unity by 10%. So I'm going to, because I Didn't care about the revolt risk. Wanted the research efficiency. But we're going to go over to this because that's getting not terrible, but it's more than I need to deal with here. So yeah, strikes while war is going on, especially during critical stages, because I don't really think Japan, I mean, they did. Where's Darwin? Darwin is up here, I think. Is this Darwin? Yeah, they bombed Darwin, and yeah, because Darwin's honestly an outpost in Australia, because Australia is sort of this. And yes, I know I have a friend who is from over here in Perth, and he's in the Navy right now. I don't know where he is at the moment, but whether he's at sea or there. Oh, Don Ramirez, second. 10 euros. Great, Don Ramirez. Great. See, that's a name I can do better with because I live in Southern California, so I'm used to Spanish names because I would take Don and Ramirez as to be Spanish of origin. Great, 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 great indeed. Wow. Wow, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much. No, don't, Mr. Doc. No, no one should be guilted into it. Please, no. All I really want, I really appreciate people who can and feel comfortable enough with their monetary situation to contribute. What I really love is that you come on here, you interact with me, you hit that like button. I presume you're a subscriber. I don't check the subscriber list, but just subscribe, hit that like button, and if you're on live, interact with me. If you're watching something that isn't live, just say hi on there. That's all I really want, because that is, that's all that I really expect out of anybody, is just to take the time to smash that like button and say something. That's all I need. But I really, man, I'm blushing right now that you guys wanted to help out. Yes, watch streams, Mr. Duck. That's great. That is great. That is wonderful. So, this is Australia. This is where the population is. This is where most of the industry is. This is where most of the agricultural is. So might Japan had things gone better, landed and taken out Darwin and some of these other northern things? Maybe. But I really don't think Japan thinks it could invade Australia, because they realize that this is a continent. They have a map. Japan has a map. And they realize that there's a large population down here, and they already are having trouble with occupying China, manpower-wise. So, to occupy a few islands and to mostly, not care too much what's going on in the internals of these islands, they're just sort of, occupying the, the strategic good bits and whatnot, and especially, here they're just occupying the ports. Now they may travel. You may have divisions moving, from point A to point B along through rugged terrain, but they're not continuing to occupy those. They're, once they get a new port, they, ship in supplies to the new port. So occupying around here, is already stressful enough that I don't think that they're really ever planning on invading and conquering Australia. But nothing to see in the North Territories, except some crocodiles, right, Beam Slam? There really isn't much of that. That's why I say they might, just to deny the port to Australian naval and air forces, they might occupy something like Darwin. I'm just saying, if they were, being more successful than they were historically, they might cherry pick a few places on Australia, but I really don't think they're going to, come in and invade. But hell, a bunch of submarines sitting off here and periodically carriers showing up doing, raids on things. That's going to really wreck, Australia, New Zealand, whatnot. So that you're striking while that is still critical. Not, we could talk about striking during the American invasion of Iwo Jima. Well, now, of course, Iwo Jima and that invasion is being supplied out of, Hawaii. That's not coming out of Australia, as far as I know. Australia is supporting the sort of Philippines MacArthur approach. But so it's one thing if the war is going pretty damn good, and we're sort of finalizing it up, and you're doing some sort of strikes or work stoppages or something like that a bit. Yeah, that's not I'm not saying good, but I got to see the reasons that you're striking over. But to do it in the middle of, and it wasn't just, the Americans, I think, were the only ones fighting on Guadalcanal, but some of these other places were being held out by Commonwealth units. And so to strike during that, to me, is just criminal. Criminal that, yes, death penalty would be worthy of, not for everyone, but like I say, decimation. Gamer and his fascism now I'm going to hear about. Okay. Tungsten surplus effects because we sold some. Okay, you're retreating, so let's see if we can retreat to strategic move if we can. We'll see if we can get back to here, because I think we'll do better holding across the straits than trying to hold Mindanao. Okay, we just, yeah, as soon as these guys show up, we lose all of our retreating progress. I don't know if we can. Okay, well, let's see. Crude oil, yes, you can have crude oil. Well, they're bringing some battleships there, so let's. The reason we can't move is maybe because they've got some other stuff that we don't see here. Okay. Submarine crew training, good. We do submarine damage control and unrestricted submarine warfare doctrine. First come down here, and I think we're going to have to, yes, stop that. That'll free up a little bit. Let's see, do we want to do damage control? Yeah, damage control is worthy to do. We can do unrestricted submarine warfare doctrine soon. Stick those strikers into penal unit and send them to the front. Yeah, that's another good. But the big problem is when everybody's striking and you need them to function as dock workers. If you had replacements, well, one, the strike wouldn't be that important. See, that's why, I'm not saying shoot them all. I was saying 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 or 1 in whatever, and say, hey, if you're striking again tomorrow, we're going to do this again. They're going to very quickly decide to get back to work. Look, I understand history, as you guys sort of know. And I understand Australia's history to some degree. Starstreak is from New Zealand, so he's closer to the issue than I am. But there is definitely an element of penal colony situation going on with Australia as part of their culture. But also, I get the idea that Australians, and looking back at some of the colonial wars, or as well as World War I, that they're sort of like, hey, we're our own sort of nation, and why do we need to be under English command? And situations around Gallipoli and the British in World War I that had a legacy there that and they don't have the death penalty, my understanding, that they didn't then, they don't now. Maybe they do now, I don't know. And I could be wrong, but I don't think they had the death penalty. Because I remember one of the cases, I was seeing something about it. The Australians were complaining that the English were going to shoot some people during World War II, or World War I, I mean, or something like that. But they don't have the death penalty, but they were, whatever they did, and England did, so England was going to shoot them. So yeah, I get that there's some of that going on, but at some point you need to with World War II is that this is no longer a European war like World War I functionally was. Yes, I know Japan and China were on the Allied side, and they took out, Germany's holding here, and they took out Germany's imperial islands out here. Yes, I understand that. Australia got this from Germany. Yes, I understand. So Australia did benefit. If this is a benefit to Australia, I presume it is. It's not the greatest place in the world, but yeah. World War I is outside of Europe, but it's primarily a European war. And I get the idea that Australians might not be interested in, supporting the British Raj or suppressing the South Africans down here. Ah, Don Ramirez. Well, thank you, Don. You are being so nice. So now, Mr. Duck, you have contributed. So thank you so much, Don. You're such a nice guy. Thanks so much. Do appreciate this. Wow, what a day. What a day. 2 from Don. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. And, of course, thank you. I wish I knew how to pronounce it. Je Valdoras. Wish I could pronounce that better. And I do wish I spoke French better, but I don't. So thank you so much, both of you gentlemen, and Mr. Duck in spirit. Thank you. And I understand that they, the Afrikaans or suppressing the, black Africans. I get all that kind of thing. But by World War II, this is no longer for Australia and New Zealand, and like I say, this really wasn't maybe about either of these countries' existence, meaning I really don't think Japan is going to conquer and be able to, do a man in the high castle thing in which Japan is ruling over these territories. I really don't think that is anywhere in the cards. But Japan's sitting right off, and if the war ends and Japan is, holding New Guinea and these islands and making, demands, shipping around here, that's going to really suck for Australia for a long time to come if Japan wins and owns all of the territory, even whether they're with puppet states or whatever, to the north of them. It is supremely in Australia's interest to be deeply involved in it. Okay, now before I got off. So it's like I was saying, Hitler makes it easy for FDR by declaring war on America, because, like I say, there's lots of Italian Americans, there's lots of German Americans. People think of Eisenhower, they think German American, who really is. So my understanding, I haven't read an in-depth biography on him, but to me he seems like an American. But where I've read a biography on Nimitz, which is the guy running the Pacific campaign, and he's from the part of Texas which is German American, and one of the few German American parts that were pro-Confederate. And there was controversy in his family when he decided to go and join the go to Annapolis and go into the Union Navy, because his family, I don't know if they owned slaves or not back in the Civil War, but they were very anti-Northern, but they were a very much German family that spoke some level of German, even though they go back to being in America since the Civil War. So there are communities like that, and still in this sort of East Texas area, there are communities that are, I don't know how much they've changed and how much they've grown with different peoples from different parts of the world moving in, but have these sort of deep roots to Germany, even though they've been there for maybe not quite 100 years at the time of World War II, but had been around. And these aren't just the, post-World War I immigrants. So you have a lot of these people out there that may or may not be Nazis. Some of them, you know about the German-American Bund, which most assuredly were Nazis. But they don't want to see their their cousin or brother or super distant cousin being bombed in the war, or like whether for Italy or Germany. They don't want to see that. They have an emotional attachment. This is what, and I know a lot of, again, modern people will jump to race when you treat Europeans different than you treat other peoples in other parts of the world. Well, yes, because a lot of us can go, now I don't have, well, super distant people, but I don't have people that are like cousins first or second removed in other countries. But a lot of Americans did at this time. Now, a lot of them were being persecuted by the Nazis, absolutely, but there's a lot that even if their family members were Nazis, they still don't want to see them destroyed. They just see them as they're making the bad choice kind of thing and would love them corrected. So by America declaring war on these countries is going to be much more of a split than, well, hey, they declared war on us. So, but because we need to do this, we're going to come here to Germany here, and we're going to declare war. And I guess we're going to try to do, we're just going to do install democracy, I guess, is what we're going to consider this. Because we're not trying to take territory. We're not trying to own it. We're not trying to puppet it, though that is sort of what happens through the partitioning. But we're going to install democracy. So we are now at war, or they're now at war with us. So we are now at war with Germany here. Okay, so what we need to do is, do I have, I think I have a few, but not many, because I've sent most of the stuff out to the Pacific. Those are those, I know we have the bombers there. I'm looking for other fighters. I guess we really don't. So it begins. Well, it's begun with Japan already. Okay, we're going to... These guys are naval striking and are sort of worn themselves out. Okay. Well, you know what we're going to do is we're going to do the British strategy here. Okay, we're actually going to, we're going to put in a commander on these units, and then we're going to wait till them get reorganized, because putting in a commander will produce them. We're going to do nighttime bombing at first, just because we don't have fighter escorts or the ability to win the there we go, looking for a strategic bomber type commander. So let's come down here, might as well target right type. Okay, so we're going to do this. Once we get these guys back organized up, we're going to should have done this earlier. Like I said, I would much prefer to play slower, but I'm trying to keep this stuff going. I mean, really grindingly slow, but no. Okay, well, let's move all of you. Well, we'll just move you guys. I think we'll push to Mogadishu here. Take out that port, which will limit some degree the supplies they can get. Okay, Edward O'Hara becomes first USN flying ace. Lieutenant Commander Edward Henry Butch O'Hare was the first Irish-American naval aviator of the United States Navy, who on February 20, 1942 became the first flying ace when he single-handedly attacked a formation of 9 heavy bombers approaching his aircraft. Even though he had limited amount of ammunition, he managed to shoot down or damage several enemy bombers. On April 21st, 1942, became the first naval recipient of the Medal of Honor in World War II. O'Hara's final action took place on the night of 26 November 26, 1943, while he was leading U.S. Navy's first ever nighttime fighter attack launched from an aircraft carrier. During a encounter with a group of Japanese torpedo bombers, O'Hara's F-6F Hellcat was shot down. His aircraft was never found. In 1945, the U.S. Navy destroyer O'Hara was named in his honor. Very interesting, very good. War with Germany. Everybody, yay. Okay, we got a lot of officers and some manpower increased. Edward O'Hara, yes. Lots of prioritizing Pacific and Atlantic. Yes. Oh, yes. Now, okay, basic education advance. Good. That's under here, I do believe. Okay, so we're done with the education, but that will pump up our leadership capabilities. I know we just got these two, which were important to get going research-wise. These are all very useful because they reduce the time between attacks, but we're not making many attacks yet, but we can do unrestricted submarine warfare, which will help our war in the Pacific. Now, what this will do is, let's see, if we come naval map mode. Okay. Germany has sunk. Okay. Our convoys are coming up around here. So what we need to do here is, we had not been at war with Germany until now, so I knew that this was coming, and yes, I should have better prepared. Let's send, this is the old Langley. They do eventually, and I haven't looked into this, get a new Langley. Okay, I don't think I want to be that close. We can come up to Scapa Flow up here, because we see all these enemies have sunk one convoy. Okay, so we're going to rebase up there. This is going to be an anti-submarine patrol, very much so. We have more motor torpedo boats over here. Heavy cruisers, more heavy cruisers, DDs. Okay, scouting force under Kirk. No, it's not James T. Kirk. We'd win the war even quicker if it was. No. We got all those destroyers. So what we're going to do is, let's put these guys here. Okay, let's get this 42. We don't need 42 in one stack. That looks reasonably good. Let's put you guys up to here. We can sort of get this area with them. Okay, still 31. I don't think we're facing that big of a situation from German or Italian fleets in the Atlantic. Well, we want to get out to here. We don't yet have there. So I guess we're going to see about spacing to here. Don't know. We'll try to get out there to sink some of these submarines. Training squadron, but let's pull you off here. Okay. Okay. Well, let's just send you off here as well. Oh, we can come up here to Scapa Flow as well. Should have a nice big base. Now, what we're going to do here is, and it's partially, and I should, yes, have been looking at it more in advance, but promote you up. We should have already sent these guys here. We're going to send them. Oh, no. I don't go through that damn Mediterranean. Come to here. And we're going to send them around here. And we're going to try to send them eventually up into here to raid supplies coming into Ethiopia once they get there. Now, mentioning that, we have This fleet here, they should come back to here because I don't want them to go through the Mediterranean, but get out there so you're no longer being supplied there. Get you home to get more stuff coming out. Okay, so that... we need more, and we are building more tags. Fireside chat. Okay. Great struggle taught us increasingly. Okay. February 23rd. I'm not going to slow down to read that whole thing. I slowed down enough, I know. Okay. Lovely. Well, we need to do the 3-man turret. Okay, let's get that going. Let's get something basic like that going. Let's see, the Stuarts had 2-man turrets. The Grants and the Lees, okay, they're coming here on these beaches out here. Yeah, no, I'm not going up right now to do anything off the, the Alaskan islands. We are concentrating down here where it really counts. Those are the ones that come to get repaired. All right. Okay. So let's see. Let's get these guys out of here because we can't. Oh no. Well, no. Let's leave one there. You guys go over to there. Let's see you're escorted. See, what do the Dutch want? We give them money for supplies. All right. We have the money. We could use some supplies now. Let's see where Pacific this and Pacific Transport Fleet are. There we go. Okay, so now we have our invasion fleet. Let's see if we can put 2 divisions on board there. Not the Hawaiian division. Let's do this one. And this one. Okay. Now let's see. Can we invade here? No. That is too far away for... Okay, let's come over here. Let's see if it's just, if we can get a little bit closer. I don't... it's going to move a lot slower with those auxiliary transports. Okay, yep, we lost. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're taking out unimportant islands. And Japan does this, as far as I understand it, merely as a distraction. They're trying to get America to put resources in up here. Maybe Act 2 is nowhere close enough to like do any bombing raids in reality or whatever. I don't even know a Stratofortress, the B-20, what is it, the B-26s late in the war that they were flying out of here. I don't even know if they could make the run, and northern Japan is not well industrialized. I don't even think today. So there's really not much, air power, but naval, yeah, you could, it's enough of a place that you could set up a, naval resupply kind of facility in here and operate submarines and whatever. So this may be useful for Japan as a strategic point. None of this is really useful for the U.S., and there's very, very few people here. And the U.S. does on here, but some of these islands, before they're invaded or whatever, they forcibly move out some of the people. B-29s, that's it. Thank you. I'm not as good with aircraft as I am with tanks. Yeah, it is a bit of a flanking move, but you really have to... Now, I know this projection is not correct, this map projection, but the Pacific is so big that there really isn't. You can see, because Hawaii is fairly south from the United States, and so everything is coming to Hawaii, out here. These islands here, yes, Wake and Midway, and see... again, getting all these islands, they go back to Alfred Thayer Mahan in the 19th century, and the influence of sea power on history is his book, or books. There's 2 volumes. Just often shorted to influence. And it was, when they used coal and steamships, well, modern ships are still steamships. Nuclear carriers, you know what? They're still steam vessels. They use the heat from the nuclear thing to create steam to move. Yeah, so they're still steam vessels, but coal burning steam versus oil burning steam, or reciprocating steam engines versus turbine steam engines might be the real sort of defining between them. But when he's looking at coal bases, they want coal bases. That's why they want to take out the Philippines, which is Spanish held. They want to own take out Guam. When they invaded Guam, Yamamoto's diversionary attack on the Aleutians arguably costed him Midway. Very well could be. Yeah, I don't know how much it would have changed things, but arguably yes. If he had a bit more force, yes, it could. Arguably, it could. I don't know that. I don't know if it was. Oh, so we've lost. Okay, we lost out here, but we're winning. It was one of these that's been ground down. Okay, well, Amphibious unit training, but yeah, obviously what really costs him is the Americans know he's coming and roughly know when he's coming, so they're ready for him. That's what that's how I look at it. And as I've recently learned, there's a lot more magnetic interference, at least down here in the air, than some other places, especially over most of America, that interrupts radio transmissions. I don't know how much, because I've often wondered, why the hell was the American attack on the carriers at Midway, correct me if I'm wrong, so uncoordinated with each other? You have all the torpedo bombers going in first, and they all get shot down. Only like one survivor. But because of that, all of Japan's fighters are all down low. When finally the dive bombers come in, but they're all sort of coming in. They all sort of like they're not coordinated well. They don't have fighter coverage. The fighters are sort of, because there are fighters off those carriers that are launched, but I don't know if on either sets of runs for the dive bombers versus as well as the torpedo bombers, if the torpedo bombers had fighter coverage. Yeah, there were problems with the airdrop torpedo. They might not have worked anyways, so that might have been a wasted effort, because there was not only a problem with the submarine torpedoes, there was a problem with the airdrop torpedoes. And so, in different problems with the airdrop torpedoes, and some of it related to how they're going into the water, and do they get too damaged going into the water and stuff like that. More so that than not exploding when they hit on contact, but there was still some problem there, I think. But had they had some level of fighter coverage, I don't know, but a percentage of them might have successfully made their attack runs and got out. Now whether they would have sunk anything, I don't know. So we definitely see a lack of coordination between a single air arm, meaning they're all naval air. There was the land-based bombers that claimed a bunch of ships sunk, but didn't touch anybody. And those were well uncoordinated, but that was the Army Air Forces versus the Navy, air power. So those weren't well coordinated amongst each other, but even within one branch, coming off of the same sets of carriers, they were not well coordinated. So, but it ended up working out okay in the sense that it was a startling American victory by that point. But it's as much as that, and I don't know whether Japan having more more there that wasn't up on the Aleutians would have changed the outcome. Very well might have. I don't know. Because if they had had more, fighter air cover, would they have kept those pilots, the extra fighter pilots up high to then intercept the incoming dive bombers? And then that's done. But I've recently learned the Japanese radios were not as good as the American radios. They were not as well shielded, so they in the aircraft radios. So they got more interference or whatever from both the aircraft itself as well as the magnetic problem. And they kept the radios in the aircraft when they were the Navy did when they were coming on in and off carriers to be able to sort of kind of talk to the carriers, but it didn't work very well. When the Navy was basing their fighters off of land bases, they often took the radios out just to save the weight, and they went up and flew uncoordinated. I didn't realize this. Most of the Japanese are flying most of the time without radio coordination, even if they have the radios in because they work so poorly, or they've taken them out. So they're flying in formation, and then they see the American, forces and go after them. But after that, there's maybe the wingman is staying on his his main who he's supporting and all that stuff, and they may have tactics worked out, but they're not using the radios because they pulled them out of their aircraft, so they're not talking to each other in the middle of dogfights to warn, hey, there's somebody on your tail, or everybody pull off, we're losing, speed out of here, or whatever. They're not doing that. That's got to cost them stuff. And the Americans with better radios, better shielded systems, I know that their coordination is helping them against the Japanese. They may be still at times losing, the kill win-loss ratio at times, especially early on. But, warnings and coordination in combat have got to be a useful element. Japanese were taking a long time using torpedoes for ships or drop bombs on Midway. Yes, that is Sun Temple. That is true. They were preparing to I don't know if I'll get this order right, but for the second wave, the first wave went in and bombed the island, or bombed the island as planned. But once they realized that there's carriers, then let's unhook all the bombs off of the dive bombers or torpedo bombers or whatever, and put torpedoes on them, and and they're swapping back and forth, and that all takes time. And so if you had some more forces, and if they because I really don't think the supporting other ships really helped that much in anti-aircraft support. Japanese had, at that time, I don't think they were like the Americans, and they didn't have enough anti-aircraft guns on their ships. And I'm not saying they didn't help at all, but I don't think that was the main thing. Having a couple of destroyers around a carrier, I don't think was really protecting them in an anti-aircraft sense, like late war Americans were able to do. And it's mid or late war that they were really able to do. A battleship sailing in formation with some of the carriers by that time had so much anti-aircraft, and with they're centrally, and unlike Japanese, to my knowledge, do not have centrally targeted anti-aircraft, let alone they don't have any proximity fuses that the Americans had to do it. But the 40 millimeter guns were either centrally, the 5-inch guns were centrally aimed and targeted, so that they're with rather good computers, and the 40 millimeter guns, and eventually the 20 millimeter, even though it was sort of on it, they had a targeting computer on, set up there, and you'll see they'll see a 40 millimeter gun mounting here, or it's either a double or a quad, and you'll see up above it, you'll see another little sort of semi-armored little basket, and that is actually up there is actually the guy who's pointing, who's using a sort of computer thing that is pointing in and is targeting the 40 millimeter below. And the 40 millimeter guys, they just look and see where they're supposed to be aiming. It's not like I don't think it's mechanical. Maybe it is. mechanical that the upper guy is actually controlling it, but he's at least sending down, XY coordinates that the computer is figuring out, and so the guys that are aiming are just sort of like keeping it on the dot, and then loading these guns. So the anti-aircraft is shooting down aircraft that are going parallel to this, not coming in to attack your ship, but going into to attack the carrier. You're able to shoot other aircraft out of the air coming around much better. So the Americans have really got that thing nailed down by the end of the war. Early on, not at all. Hello, Nakashiki 80. U.S. Navy had issues with spotting squadrons quickly. They were very slow. They did not develop systems for coordination until late 42 or 43. Yeah, and as more, good to have you here, Nakashiki. I don't recognize your name before. So if you're new, please, everyone hit the subscribe button. The Americans, well, early in the war, they don't even have 40 millimeter and 20 millimeter guns. They don't even have those yet. I don't know exactly when they start getting them, but it's into 43 that they're still replacing out water-cooled 50s and their Chicago pianos, as they call them, the sort of, I think they're 4 or 5 barreled, horizontally barreled 1.1 inch guns. That aren't very good. They're still replacing those into 43. Now, new production is getting Oerlikons that are made in America and Bofors that are made in America, but America's taken a while to spin all that stuff up. So yeah, early on, it is difficulty. Now, they are doing much better with radar, and it gets going a lot better again as time is going on. They do have radar at the start of the war on some of the ships. I don't know quite how well it's out to all of the fleet. But that hand crank AA was bad. Japanese never. Yeah, Japan never catches up. And even the operators that are operating on those 40 millimeter turrets, those are powered turrets. So even though you may see the hands moving, they're not muscling the AA guns around. They're just turning cranks to adjust, and so it's a powered turret, so long as the power's working at least. So it's a powered turret. Those either dual, the ones on the ships. And you get the AA guns that are on submarines, and they call them wet mounts versus dry mount. Wet mounts were unpowered, and so those were manually done. And they did have some wet mount 40 millimeters and whatnot, and those are muscled because they didn't do external power mountings for submarines that dive down. So yeah, it varies. And of course, those same mountings are what's on like PT boats. And again, those are muscled. But on the destroyers and the battleships and whatnot, those are by mid to late war. Those are powered turrets, and they are, again, the aircraft is flying at an odd angle from your ship heading towards a carrier that's nearby, and they're able to reasonably well calculate real time your aiming points for you. And yeah, obviously the Japanese are able to make torpedo attacks, bomb attacks, and kamikaze attacks and get through all of that, but a lot of them were shot down too. So and this is all coming here and not yet a reality. Okay, amphibious unit training. No, that's over here. Okay, 42. Well, just submarines. We're going to keep that going. And Eastern Bank. Okay, doesn't report. Boston convoy has been. Okay, so yes, we are getting some of our ships over here. We see presumably these are submarines, German. Out here, we can again look at our naval viewpoint. So this is our convoys to here. Apply this. And we are sending out anti-submarine forces. We had not faced this ourselves from Germany till we just declaring war, but they're now a thing. Oh, the Battle of Los Angeles. Air battle rages over Los Angeles. As many of you may know, I was born in Los Angeles County, not in Los Angeles City. And I'm still living in Southern California area. I don't want to quite give away my exact coordinates. But so yeah, this is hometown for me. The Battle of Los Angeles, also known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, is the name given by contemporary sources to the rumored enemy attack and subsequent anti-aircraft artillery barrage, which took place from late 24th February to early, meaning over the night, late at night into the morning of 25th February over Los Angeles, California. The incident occurred less than 3 months after the United States entered World War II as a result of the attack on Pearl Harbor. One day after the bombardment of Elwood in February 23, initially the target of the aerial barrage was thought to be an attacking force from Japan, but speaking at a press conference shortly afterwards, Secretary of Navy Frank Knox called the incident a false alarm. Newspapers of the time published a number of reports and speculations of cover-up. Some modern-day UFOologists have suggested the targets were extraterrestrial spacecraft. Interesting. I believe that there's life out there. I don't know if life from out there has ever made it here. I don't know. I know my dad sort of believes that stuff, but I'm skeptical that it's made it here. But I believe there's aliens somewhere out there. When documenting the incident in 1983, the U.S. Office of Air Force History attributed the event to the cause of war nerves, likely triggered by the loss of a weather balloon and exacerbated by stray flares, shell bursts from adjoining batteries. If you haven't, you should watch the movie 1941. It's George Lucas, or is it Steven Spielberg? One of the two did it. John Belushi is in it. All-star cast. It's a comedy. It's about this incident that is highly exaggerated, but it is a really good comedy. So yes. So we have that, but it was a real incident out there that they thought they were under attack. Okay, battleship crew training. Now, could Japan have done this in this time period? Absolutely. Now, I don't know the operational range of the Japanese carriers, but it would have been an extremely long range for them to do so. I know the best in the world at sea refueling and resupplying was the Americans, or America becomes that. Yes, Germany does use its the milk cows submarines to refuel and give supplies, not torpedoes, but give food and whatnot to German submarines, keep them at sea longer. During the war, the British are very poor at it. They really have to work at stepping up at sea resupply to keep up with the American fleets in the Pacific once they join there. The British just have bases everywhere, so it's just not a priority for them to do at sea resupply. So you really look at a lot of British fleets. They're not coastal fleets, but they're not Pacific-based idea of great operation out long range. The British Navy just isn't. Again, because they have bases everywhere, and so it's more than coastal for sure. It is a blue water navy, but it's not quite like the American was even set up prior to World War II, because the American Navy really looked at what they were their area of operation planned for. They knew they were going to operate in the Atlantic too, but everything was planned for the Pacific. If they had taken Pearl Harbor, it would have been possible, at least in the short term. Well, absolutely, if they had taken Pearl Harbor. But what they could have done is, in 1941, Japan had a few submarines that carried an aircraft. Now, single aircraft. And I think they had like less than 10 of these submarines. And these submarines were primarily part of Japan's idea And the U.S. sort of had this idea too. But Japan thought, and before the war starts, and they thought they were going to fight a battle in which the American fleet is going to get ready and is going to, once they're going, the American fleet is going to come across the Pacific and going to come to Japan, sort of like the Russian fleet does around the world too, in straits, in the Russo-Japanese War. They sort of thought that, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to have a screen of like submarines way out here on the front to one, spot this fleet as it's coming, and two, attrit it, meaning have a few submarines in the way to hopefully sink a few big juicy targets. And as this fleet's coming, and then maybe have some other skirmishing destroyers and whatnot that are also going to be somewhat suicidal, at least in the idea that they're all going to get sunk. Maybe they get rescued, but willing to get sunk, to then to fix and locate this fleet out there, and then once they've figured out where it is, then to attack it and be victorious. And I think part of the reason they wanted these carrier submarines was so that you can see out in a greater area, not so much of wanting to do raiding or strategic bombing, but they certainly could have. Now, one thing I truly do believe in is we can call it asymmetric warfare, meaning if you just got somewhere out here, take off, get 4 submarines, and they had some long-range submarines, and these submarines very well could have made it. I think, I don't quite know, with that, once you own Wake Island, you're a little bit closer to refueling, so you got to, for submarines versus a big, huge fleet, you can refuel at Wake Island and you can send them out here. I think they'd probably be able to make it. And you do a raid here that you come in, and somehow, if you can arrange a night hookup, I don't know, or maybe just hope that you can do a bombing raid and get out before any pursuit squadrons can hit you. And you do something like that here, and then maybe do something like that somewhere else along the American coast. You make the Americans do a lot more other effort, because this is the heart of the American aircraft industry right out here. Was then, not anymore. California, again, driven all of the aircraft industry out of the California government has driven it all out of California. A bunch of it moved up to, was it Oregon, I think, or Washington, and a bunch of it, Washington State, a bunch of it's moved back east, but California's driven it all out. Every last bit of it. Yay! We're now much poorer, but yay. That if you look at some photos of it, you see the aircraft factories that they build during this time period, or some already pre-existing, and some of it is actually one racetrack, horse racetrack is turned into an aircraft factory for a while until they build some more buildings. They're actually building them out because they have some covered area under the bleacher type things. They're strongly built bleachers. They set up some machine tools and some open air because it's very, very nice weather out here. You can build outside most of the time just fine. It doesn't snow and it only rains rarely. So, but you see what they built there, either covering it in camouflage netting to look, because there's still lots of big, huge, even in Los Angeles County at this time, during 1940s, big areas of just fields. So they're covering it in camouflage netting, or in a few cases, they're sort of painting it to look like a residential neighborhood from the air. So that they're worried enough and they're putting anti-aircraft stuff, and a lot of this stuff is going on in 42 and 43 at least. And they're really worried about the possibility of an air raid. So had there been an actual air raid or two, that just means a lot more anti-aircraft guns, attempts at camouflage, a lot more fighters would be demanded to patrol this area, a lot more military personnel, whether Navy or Army or whatever, would all be stationed here that wouldn't be somewhere else, that would be more useful to actual war effort. So this is what I talk about, asymmetric warfare. So the idea that doing a few raids like this isn't going to defeat America, but the cost of those raids, even if all those aircraft are shot down, will be a lot more costly to the Germans and the Japanese. Japanese should blow up U.S. oil reserves. That would teach us not to do an oil embargo. Well, okay, here's, you want to know why they didn't, Ragar? They didn't even blow up, and it was part maybe on the second or third wave into Pearl Harbor if they were going to do it, but they didn't, which they should have prioritized as much as the, and it wouldn't have taken much to prioritize the oil storage at, Pearl Harbor here. I don't know that it was specifically in Pearl Harbor. It was generally somewhere in Honolulu. Meaning Pearl Harbor is this sort of harbor, and this is what Ford Island right in the center, and Battleship Row, I think, is right along there. And these are other moorings for ships or whatever. I don't know exactly when this is taken, but it's definitely a wartime era. But there's sort of the sort of somewhere around the areas where the main fuel oil is. It's not right by the ocean or right by the harbor. At least some of it isn't. Yamamoto, who plans the Pearl Harbor attack, he's traveled all over America. He went to I forget which university. He went to university here. Was known as a really good poker player. He travels across America, goes sees Detroit and the productions in Detroit, auto production in Detroit. He travels across Texas and he sees all the oil. So his perception is America has plenty of industry, plenty of oil, and all of it is untouchable because it is so far out here. What he doesn't really realize is had he destroyed this oil, it would have, I've heard estimates, it would have taken like 6 months for the U.S. to get more oil out to here and to build tanks to put it in. So it's not just simply having a tanker and saying, go, out from, whether it's the West Coast oil, because there's lots of oil out here, or whether it's, Gulf oil coast coming through the, Panama Canal. It's not just simply the tankers showing up, but it's getting out there and building up, the places to do it. That they could have possibly kept U.S. operations, the carriers, from operating for 6 months. Because the big thing is, and when I first started to read Ragar's comment, I thought he was going to say the Japanese didn't have enough oil to waste on a carrier group to come out here to do a silly raid. And you're probably right that probably would have burnt up too much oil for Japan. Oh, you should be in port. You get in port. That probably would have been too much, to burn up. But for a few submarines, it would have been worth it. And so, if I were Japan, and since you had the aircraft submarines, I would have definitely trained up to see what you could do to do some bombings. And whether, like, when they, Santa Barbara oil fields or someplace like that, maybe away from, Los Angeles, where you might presume that there's going to be a lot of fighter pursuit squadrons ready to scramble and come in and be able to shoot you out of the air or follow you out, to where you're going to land and try to get back on your submarines. Not that they have to be perfectly safe, but trying, not to risk too much. I would have done some pinprick airstrikes along the American coast, and make them do a lot more. Okay, Mr. Duck, thanks for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate everything. So, yep, be back tomorrow with War Thunder. Second wave should have destroyed the tankers. Yes, submarine ring should make hard resupply. They should be able to sue for peace. Well, okay, they won't sue for peace. America, that's not going to happen. Cracking the naval yes, naval codes are super important. But you see, that's what Japan thinks, that they're going to destroy the fleet and then America's going to sue for peace. But America can just always build another fleet. It can always build another fleet. So long as America is willing to fight the war, it can always build another fleet. Japan cannot, because Japan does not have enough industry and enough steel to just build another fleet if their fleet gets sunk. Their fleet takes years, and I don't mean takes decades to build up. shall we say. And yeah, I know they're building the Taiho and one other big carrier during the war, and so they are building either replacements, which that's what they turn out to be, or just additional major fleet assets. And the Taiho was supposed to be a pretty special fleet or ship, but I think poor training gets it sunk very easily, because Japan cannot affect, well, if you want to call this the East Coast or the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. They do not have submarines. They do not have ships that can affect here. So they could theoretically, let's say if they take in Hawaii, or I know you were talking about submarines around Hawaii to keep resupply there, but let's just say if they even took Hawaii and put submarines off of here, fine. Let's say they even have battleships that come along and bombard ports that are shipbuilding facilities, because Kaiser is a major was at least a major shipbuilding company that hugely expands on the West Coast and builds lots of ships. I think mostly like into destroyers and transport, big transports. They build a lot of the Liberty ships, I believe. Kaiser out here, and yeah, they could do that, or carriers sit off and do airstrikes on these things, but they can't touch here. And if they can shut down here, that's going to help them more, but it's just not possibly mostly peaceful yet. The Japanese should sue for peace and then call for the whole action peaceful protest against oil embargo. Yeah. So yeah, mostly peaceful action. Yeah, I know, but trust me, America used to get enraged about being attacked and burned and destroyed, and they were enraged. Battleship crew training. Okay, 43. We're going to stop that for now. I don't know if I should give the Americans snorkels, because they didn't use snorkels. Well, let's air conditioning. Reduces their range, but I found out more about air conditioning. One, yes, it does use electrical power, so that does burn more electricity that they're generating either on the surface or below. But one of the things they really, why do the Americans air condition their submarines? They don't air condition their surface ships, at least not generally speaking. Why do they air condition their submarines? Well, it's because of the electronics. It's not so much the crew. Japan does not have nearly the electronics. Because most submarines, at least, I don't know about the S-series submarines, which we're using, but the Gatos and all those, most all those have radars and other electronics down inside of them. And much of the time, they're on the surface, at least during the day still. They dive when they're, if they're sitting off of a Japanese island somewhere, they're going to be dived, kind of thing. But, or, off Japan. But when they're just traveling here, they're on the surface most of the time. Unlike, say, the Germans who, as they leave here, they're either on the surface at night or they're dived during the day because there's so much, anti-submarine activity via air. No, the Americans are traveling out here most of the time on the surface, or like in the Mediterranean. I've read a lot about the British experience in the Mediterranean. Most of the time, the Mediterranean, including in port, like in Malta, not so much maybe, back in Alexandria, but in Malta, the British, they got submarines operating out Malta. Their standard procedure is, just before dawn, because it's a big harbor, Valletta area, because there's more than one harbor in the area, but Valletta is sort of the main harbor. Take their submarine out somewhere and just sink it to the bottom of the harbor and sit down there and with only like a skeleton crew while they're in port, and just come back up at night and go back to a dock to do repairs or resupply or whatever. But at night, as long as they could submerge, they would go. Days, as long as they would submerge, they'd be down there. And most of the time during the day, in the Mediterranean, they would be submerged and just come up at night to recharge their batteries and do faster movements most of the time because it's so much air. But the Americans, they're on the surface a lot because this is so huge of an area, and it's hot, and it's going to be humid, and it is humid down there, and it's going to really affect electronics. So they air conditioned it. So I get the idea morale here. Okay, and this is the effect that the game gives. And morale's a good thing, but the big thing it would be better attack, sea attack, because better surface detection, because this keeps these electronic devices going, and that's the main reason that the Americans do the air conditioning. So yeah, we'll do. I know it'll cut down our range here, but we'll do that just for being historically. Have you seen the movie 1941? Yes. Ragnar, guys, I was talking about that a moment ago. You probably were tuned out or something when we were talking about the Battle of Los Angeles. So, yes, very much. I recommend to everybody to see 1941. I recommend it highly. Okay, let's see. We've get to this view. Okay, we've got those guys there. So we just have. Oh, they went over to here. Okay, get back onto your ships. Can you invade with these here? No, damn it, no. These guys are. This might be a little closer, so we're going to go out to here. And yes, I know we're just escorting all this with destroyers, but hopefully I was hoping just to go here, and of course we have the battleships. But we're going to keep out here because what we're hoping to do is starving them. Okay, they're coming after us here. Burroughs Island, okay, yes, I know. Oh, we lost these guys out here. And I did have them on, yeah, okay. Japan took them down. Surprised these motor torpedo boats are still there. South Africa would like submarine, yes, we can do. Okay, Western Faroes. Okay, we are getting closer with these guys to do anti-submarine patrols. These guys, no. Well, I know the seaplane tenders are really slow. Not those, okay, not those. Maybe they're way back. Yeah, these guys are really slow. But we'll have some of them to really hopefully shut down. Oh, you were making dinner. Okay, Ragnar, no problem, no problem. But yes, 1941, great movie. Everyone should see it. After the stream, check it out. Okay, light cruiser escort role. Yes. That is here. We're going to do that. I'm not doing what I would do for sure if I was Britain, meaning here, because it disrupts our destroyers for being surface attack, but it helps in sub attack for sure. But I'm just going to suffer without this because I want to keep my destroyers good for fleet actions. Ah, okay. So we've now taken out a light cruiser and 2 destroyers with no loss and, well, some damage on that light cruiser there. Here we go. Okay, they're trying to get out their large amount of their forces here. Oh, okay. Don't know how long this is going to take, but we're getting these guys to go over there to reinforce here. Okay. Yes, you can have energy, Saudi Arabia. Okay. Ooh, let's see. We took out a destroyer, or a destroyers took out a submarine on our way through here. Very good. We'll get to helping the British out soon. Oh, let's see. Hold on. So if I can sync this. Oh, pause. Oh, pause. Okay, yeah. I'm not paying attention to that now. Army recognition reorganization. March 1942, there was a sweeping reorganization of the Army. This was the result of dissatisfaction with the existing structure, with the United States Army Air Forces, in particular seeking greater autonomy. However, the main driver was the Chief of Staff, General George Marshall. He felt overwhelmed by the large number of officers and agency, at least 61 with direct access to him. Okay. The Chief of Staff wanted no more than 3 commands reporting to him, so everything which did not fit into the General Ground Forces or the Army Air Forces became part of the Services of Supply, which were renamed the Army Service Forces on 12th March 1943. It was felt the term supply did not accurately describe their broad range of activities. Note to the player, 3 commands created by accepting this event confer small bonuses to land organization, air organization, supply throughput. You will lose these bonuses if these units are removed. Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't quite know a whole lot more than what's going on in these 61. I do know, to the best of my understanding, the United States Air Force was not created until, 47? So it is a subdivision of the Army. But as time goes on, it is becoming functionally more and more independent, and particular air forces, like Air Force, and I sort of wanted to do is like the 8th Air Force, not the Air Force or Air Forces, but this here, the 8th, I think is, and I know it has this sort of defense corps here, but is operating much on its own, in that it's targeting, it's its own thing that's doing strategic bombing. It is not what is being responsive to, give ground support to the, tactical Army movements and whatnot. And so some of these are operating much more and more independent, especially like whatever the one I forget that is, Curtis LeMay eventually is running against Japan. It's doing its own thing, and it is ignoring, Army requests, like MacArthur's requests, and it is ignoring Navy requests because, hey, it's not in the Navy, and it is doing its own stuff. And eventually there is a bit of a coming to head, and Nimitz is going, hey, you got to give me some more control over these guys because they're doing stuff not good for our overall strategy. So yeah, there is definitely that. Also, eventually they get rid of that red dot because they have. I know there's sort of wings here, but a lot of the symbols just had a blue circle with a white star and then a red dot. But looking up in the air and depending on the aircraft, you might take that for being a Japanese red sun. So eventually that red dot does go away. And also because there was a bunch of groups, and I don't know quite how much they, the 61, because there was the armored, the armor branch and the infantry branch. The armor branch basically is the cavalry moving over to that. And these, there's infantry elements in an armored division, and there's armored elements, meaning tanks, in infantry division. But they're sort of their own schools, and they're their own sort of, what they're doing back here in the United States is their own sort of thing. Now they're working much more closely, and the artillery as well, the artillery in every division, but there's these different sort of branches within the Army that would come under, Marshall here as being, Army as opposed to Navy. And so, which include the Navy, which includes the Marine Corps, but naval air forces, and there's the Navy's got aircraft on ships, and they got aircraft on land, and they're doing their own thing. Navy also has a bunch of blimps flying around. They've gotten rid of all their Zeppelins that were brought over from World War I from Germany, but they still they build lots of blimps flying around. So that's all the Navy's doing, all that fun stuff. But they also have things like the coastal artillery, that does have commands down, well, did have some out in the Philippines, but does have some down in here, and then a bunch along U.S. coasts. And the coastal artillery is its sort of own separate thing, and the coastal artillery exists until the end of World War II, and with looking around and going, hey, nuclear weapons are a thing. Yeah, I don't think we need coastal artillery anymore. That's no longer going to be a threat. The idea that you need to shoot at ships with big guns. So it wasn't until after the war that they finally broke up the coastal artillery. But yeah, okay, so we're going to do this, and we're going to get... here we go. These guys. Okay, so these are back in Washington, D.C. here. Oh, let's look at their counters. So counter flower kind of thing. Air Force and other ground forces. Okay. All right. Okay, guys, I think we're going to end this here today. I again want to thank Mr. Ike. J. Vondoras Fok. And Don Ramirez for your support with the super chats. That is so cool. You guys were the first and the second to ever give me a super chat. Great. Thank you so much. I do appreciate your support. But again, everybody else, just hit that like button, subscribe, make it, post a comment. That's all I really ask you guys to do. I'm trying to guilt you into doing that, whoever's watching now or later, because that really does help. And I do appreciate that. We'll be back tomorrow with War Thunder, hopefully with Arno and some of the other guys. And also tomorrow, after at approximately half an hour from this time tomorrow, I will be streaming Slytherin over on Slytherin's channel. So we'll be ending it at this time, by this time tomorrow. I'll be streaming over there some War in the East 2. Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2 is the final day of the sort of 40th anniversary celebration of Gary Grigsby and his work doing games. I'll be doing that tomorrow over on Slytherin channel after my War Thunder stuff. So hopefully see you guys all then. Thank you, Sun Temple Radio, Ragar, Beam Slam, Cold Steel. Hello, Cold Steel. Don't know that I said hi earlier. I don't think I did. Mr. Duck. I think you've gone. Nakashiki. Or Nakashi. Yeah, Nakashi. 80. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, and ZZ. Yes, thank you, ZZ. So see you all soon.